this image wasn't meant to be commercial beauty image, but it's a perfect illustration as to what I do sometimes or oftentimes with my raw files. We just got together. She's my favorite, one of my favorite models, Tori Tracy, and she had this lipstick, I had this nail polish, she applied her mascara, that's it. And we were just playing around and shooting. When we were shooting, it seemed like the color was identical, but when I photographed it under the lights, I can see that it's very, very different. So, like I said, if everything is perfect and you don't really need to do local changes, then you just adjust a little bit. This is basically what I do with images. I don't touch exposure, I don't need to touch my white balance because everything was shot well, and I can just play around a little bit with highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, just to make sure that I have details in the darks, I don't have too much blown out highlights, and just make it a little bit on the flatter side. Also, I don't want to add any contrast at this point because it will be more difficult for me to fix skin issues. So I just want to make sure that everything is nice and the dynamic range of the photo is a little bit expanded at this point. And with this particular image, say you've got the same situation, you need to match the colors. Of course, you can do it in Photoshop. Selective color, hue and saturation, any other color correction adjustment layer you can use. But I know that that must be done, and I know how quickly do it here, so I won't even take it to Photoshop, because obviously the data that you can get from the raw file is going to be always better than doing some things later in Photoshop, especially when it's about the exposure. Color is not so important, but sometimes they are. So to eliminate that guessing game, you know, will it look okay in Photoshop or not, I just do it right here because I know that that's what I want from the image. So the first step that I would do, I would just look at the image and do my overall corrections just to kind of get that base just to get the exposure, the overall colors nice, and obviously the skin is the most important element here. So I will create a virtual copy right here, and here I will look at whatever problems I know that I will have to deal with later, and I can see that because we didn't have a makeup artist, we didn't have any foundation on her skin, and I can see those red patches. That's normal for human beings, absolutely normal. But of course, for the image, I want to remove that redness a little bit from her skin. So this first virtual copy, I'm going to create kind of like a base layer, something that will be my base layer in Photoshop. So I'm going to play around in the hue, saturation, and luminance part of the develop module, and maybe just shift the reds a little bit towards the yellower color, and maybe just brighten them a little bit. And I don't care for the lips now, I don't care for anything else, I'm only looking at the skin. And I want that redness to go away. Maybe just get it a little bit brighter. See overall, maybe not so much. Just a little bit brighter. Okay, well, I think to start with, this is a pretty good start. So I don't see those patches all that much. Now we'll go back to the original file and create another virtual copy. Now I want to get done with the lips. And as much as I like the color, for example, just for the demonstration purposes, I want it to be a little bit more yellower, less purplish, but more yellower. So I will just do the same things, just maybe add a little bit of yellow into the reds, and then here I will do the opposite. I will actually darken the lips and maybe add a little bit of more saturation here. Again, I don't care about the skin, I don't care about anything else here, I'm only looking at the lips. And okay, I think this is good. And then I will go ahead and create one more virtual copy. And now I only care about the nails. I want to make the nails similar to this color that I've created for the lips. So I will add some saturation and maybe a little bit of yellow again and darken. And maybe just about here. I know that I can perfect it later when I have it all in PSD, but I'm just trying to get it as close as possible at this point. And a little bit brighter. Okay, this should be enough, and we'll perfect it later. So now that I've got 3 virtual copies, one for the skin, one for the lips, and one for the nails, I can select them all and right-click and take them all into Photoshop as layers. So instead of exporting each one separately, I can actually tell Photoshop to open this whole setup already in one PSD stack. And then it usually takes a little bit of time. And, well, even though it kind of saves you a couple of seconds here and there, or maybe even more, that second that it piles up the stack, you know, you don't have to actually gather them and drag them all manually. So once they're all in one same PSD, this is my skin, and I usually call it base. It's just my way of, oh, yes, I do name it base. This will be the background layer for the rest of my layers. This was my lips, and this was my, no, I think this was my nails. This is the only downside, is that you need to remember what exactly you exported for what. And then this is lips. And then just to make it quicker, of course I spend a little bit of time here to get perfect selections done and get them all perfectly merged together, but just to save our time today, I will just do something like this. This is my nails, and here, after the selection is made, and again, I do it precisely at home, I wouldn't just paste it in, but every time before I actually do anything with my selection, I always go into Refine Edge to make sure that my selection either sharp enough or soft enough, depending on what the actual outline on the image is. So here I can smooth the corners a little bit and soften maybe just a little bit, but not so much, and then add a little bit of contrast and shift the edges if I need to. And then once I feel like, okay, that's close enough, I will simply just fill them with white. And of course, one more time, I would go ahead with a brush and zoom in close enough and just make sure that everything is perfectly outlined. And then I will go ahead to the lips, and here, unfortunately, that won't select the lips precisely, but I'll do something similar just to speed it up. Okay, and of course I will then again make sure my selection is perfect. To save our time, I'll do it very quickly now. Something like this. And I won't even stop at this still. Okay, I don't care about the outlines for now. But at this point, I can say, okay, well, everything is fine. It's close enough. I can add a little bit of maybe clip mask, curve, or selective color to actually get the colors even closer to one another. For example, if I wanted to change the color of the nails, I would go ahead and add, say, selective color and clip mask it by holding Alt or Option. And then in here, I can change, oh, that's the lips. Okay, so I can apply my changes to the color until I match them perfectly. But not only that, I can do, sometimes, just remove this. Sometimes I just duplicate the layer and see how my blending modes can be helpful. For example, if I take down the original layer, and then this one, I just duplicated it and set it to soft light, and then I can adjust the opacity and see how that will work. It actually creates a little bit more depth and volume, so that can be the way to go. Sometimes if the darkness of the area that I extracted from the raw file is fine, but the color is a little bit off, and the base color is better than what I've just created on top, so I can just change the blending mode to luminosity of this top layer, and then it will only darken to the point that I want, but it won't change the color of the underlying layer. So my point here, I guess, is that don't forget that you've got those very basic and simple controls, your blending modes, your opacity, and you can group layers, and you can group adjustment layers, and you can clip mask adjustment layers. So there's so much that you can do if you still are not where you want it to be. Normally, once you go through this whole raw conversion, a few virtual copies, a couple of times, then it will really take you like 1-2 minutes to actually develop your raw file, merge whatever you need to get out of each conversion, and move on to retouching. But if you got it and you're still not sure that this is not what you were going for, remember that you've got all the adjustment layers, opacity, and blending modes to play around with.
Just one quick question. We had Dana Ichun S. and Rodberg and a few other people who were kind of wondering how this method of creating virtual copies is different from, say, using curves and hue and saturation in Photoshop with a layer mask. Why do you do it that way instead of doing everything in Photoshop?
The main reason why is that your raw file has this much data. And when you do all those changes in the raw converter, you still get the best quality of the colors and the values of the image. Once you take your image out into Photoshop, you've already thrown away so much data and you have only this much left. And then if you add your curves and change your colors, there is a very narrow limit that you can do with that file in PSD. That's the beauty of the raw converter, because you're working with that plenty of data to play around with. So that's the main reason. And again, some things can be done later in Photoshop, but I just don't even want to second guess it. Will it look good or not? I just do it right there in the raw converter, and that's it.